25, you can pretend that the world is a little messy, but mostly fine. You assume adults are handling it. You assume that systems exist for a reason. You assume that if something gets really, really bad, somebody responsible will step in and fix it. You think that there's a system, that there's a plan. You assume that somebody read ahead and highlighted the important parts, like there's a binder somewhere with answers and a calm person named Sarah just flipping through the pages like nothing in the binder has ever surprised her a day in her life. Nope. Sarah is gone. There is no Sarah. I'm Sheila. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach. I'm not a guru. I am just your internet auntie who's outlived a few identities and kept her sense of humor along the way. Now, I don't mind getting older. I really don't. My face is doing what faces do. My body makes noises now, but honestly, it was suspiciously quiet before, and I didn't trust that either. What I was not prepared for was this level of awareness. When you get older and realize the responsible adults are us, which is alarming because I've met me. I'm someone that loses her phone while actively talking on it. Responsible adult? Psh, I can barely be in charge of a crock pot. Seriously, half the time I'm standing there like, is this supposed to smell like this, or are we having a learning moment today? And once you've been on the planet long enough, you start noticing things that you didn't notice before. Not like, oh my God, I am so freaking aware. No. Like this feels like too much information for one nervous system to handle. There's a moment in adulthood when you realize that you weren't overwhelmed because life was hard. You were overwhelmed because you were trained to care about everything and then expected to carry all of it. Now, I know this because I lived inside that confusion for decades before I figured out what was actually happening. Nobody prepared me for that version of adulthood. Nobody warned me that the real exhaustion of midlife was emotional. Nobody mentioned that your brain becomes a 24-hour documentary called, well, that's concerning, and you are the only one watching it. It didn't even have seasons, just ongoing programming. No reruns, no commercial breaks. The audience was just me, sitting there, eating string cheese at midnight, being genuinely concerned. It's realizing how much is wrong and still being expected to show up every day like a functional adult who can fold laundry and answer emails without briefly considering faking your own disappearance. I did eventually figure out where it comes from, and I'm going to tell you because that's what aunties do. We hand you information that you didn't ask for, and then we walk away. You watch the news even though you already know that it's going to make you feel bad. It's like checking the stove when you know that it's still hot just to confirm, yes, it is still hot. And then you feel bad about yourself for checking, and then you check again tomorrow. You think about your parents more, and not in a sweet, nostalgic way, but in a surveillance way, where you're clocking, how they move, how long it takes them to get up from their chair, how their voice sounds when they start getting tired. You start doing the math in your head that nobody prepares you for, and none of it's survivable. I started Googling things in the middle of the night that I can't unknow. Things with names that I can't pronounce about conditions that I most decidedly definitely have. My husband has asked me to stop. I cannot stop. You see a story about someone that loses their job and your chest tightens because you don't have to imagine what that feels like. Your body remembers it. You notice things that used to slide right past you, except now they don't slide. They stick, like emotional lint. You notice the way people talk to each other, especially when they think that nobody important is listening. You notice the way systems treat people, which is not well. You notice that everyone is just a little more tired than they admit, like we're all just walking around pretending that this is sustainable, when clearly it is not. You can't walk through the world casually anymore because you see the seams now. You see where things are stitched together just enough to hold, and you can also see where they're starting to come apart while everyone keeps smiling and calling it normal. All the brain tabs are open, right? Your people, your finances, your health, the general state of everything, and all of it is running at once with no clear priority. The older that you get, the more things your brain decides are your responsibility to track, whether they belong to you or not. My empathy cabinet has been open for 5 decades, and at this point, the drawers don't even close anymore. They just sit there, slightly open, overflowing. It's actually less of a cabinet and more of a yard sale. But it's one of those yard sales where nothing is priced and someone keeps trying to hand you a ceramic rooster and you don't know how to say no. So now you also have a new ceramic rooster. When did that happen? When did noticing turn into carrying? The real issue is that I didn't just care about everything. I kept picking it up. I cared about my friends. I cared about my family. I cared about the news, the economy, the planet, the neighbor who seemed a little off last week. Responsible people care. Good daughters care. Good partners care. Good friends care. So I just kept going. Caring isn't the problem. Carrying everything is. The world never stopped adding things to my list, and nobody ever came along to remove anything from it. The list just kept growing like a junk drawer that somehow keeps producing more batteries, and none of them work, but you still feel responsible for sorting them. There was always another crisis, another story, another person who needed something, and your brain said yes to all of it like it was trying to win a prize that turns out to be more work, with a weird eye twitch. First place gets more responsibilities, and second place also gets more responsibilities. Yay! Have you had this moment too? That moment where you realized that you were full? Tell me what it was for you in the comments. I read them all. The problem is your emotional wiring doesn't come with an off switch, and your brain doesn't separate things the way that it should. Bills end up in the same mental drawer as global disasters, which is a bold filing system because one of those is laundry and the other is war, and your brain treats them both like urgent bedtime thoughts at 2:13 a.m. By the way, 2:13 a.m. is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me right now, and it feels like it deserves a little bit of acknowledgement. Your friend's divorce sits right next to the price of gas and the fact that your back made a noise yesterday that sounded expensive. You don't know what that noise was. You've decided not to find out. Your brain just files it all the same. It's all going in the same junk drawer, by the way, the one with the batteries. None of them still work. Everything just becomes another open brain tab, and closing one just opens 3 more. I swear it's cursed. After a few decades, those tabs start multiplying, and now you're walking around with this constant background hum that never fully turns off. Everything matters a little bit, and eventually that adds up to a lot. I kept waiting for someone to come along and say, oh, that's enough, that's enough. But you know what? That person's never coming. Here's where it broke for me. Nobody told me when I was allowed to stop. And I mean nobody, not teachers, not my employers, not the very reasonable self-help book that I bought and left on my nightstand for 14 months. I did eventually move it to a different nightstand, which I think we can all agree is basically the same thing as reading it. It counts. I'm going to say it counts. People trust you. People rely on you. People tell you that you're thoughtful and strong and the one who always shows up, which sounds lovely until you realize that showing up has turned into carrying everything that nobody else wants to hold. The problem is that no one teaches you that it's also a resource. It's gonna run out. So you keep spending it like it's infinite, and the world keeps accepting the payment with the same energy of someone who's never been told no a day in their life. At some point, you start to realize that just because you can care about everything doesn't mean that you should. That feels wrong at first because it sounds like you're becoming less of a good person. But what's actually happening is that you're starting to notice that you're carrying far more than you were ever meant to. There will always be another thing to worry about, another problem to notice, another person who needs something. And if you're not careful, your entire life becomes a holding space for things that were never yours to carry in the first place. So the shift isn't about becoming someone who doesn't care. The shift is realizing that caring is human. Carrying everything is learned. Your care has weight, and you get to decide where it goes. You are allowed to set some of it down. Sometimes the most responsible thing that you can do is to put a few of those bags back on the conveyor belt and let them keep moving without you, because you were never hired to carry the entire airport. Nobody is. They just keep not stopping you. I used to think that feeling tired meant that I was getting old. I assumed it was like mileage, and my body and brain were slowly wearing down at the same rate, and this was just the cost of staying alive long enough to notice things. Now, I think it meant something else entirely. I think it meant that I've been paying attention for a very long time, and that comes with a weight that nobody talks about because it doesn't look like anything from the outside. It just looks like you're a little quieter, a little more selective, and a lot less willing to pretend that things are fine when clearly they are not. Aging didn't make anything heavier, it just made it harder to ignore. I closed my eyes for a minute, I put a few things down, and it felt wrong for longer than I expected. And then it didn't. I don't think I realized how much I was carrying until I stopped and actually looked at it. And I'll be honest, I think that some people are figuring this out a lot earlier than I did. So if you figured it out earlier than me, you're ahead. honest. Good for you. I mean that with zero sarcasm and honestly a little bit of envy. And if you didn't, pull up a chair because apparently this is where we catch up. The second that you stop carrying everything, something in you starts to panic, like you missed something, like you're about to get in trouble, like you should be doing more. And that's not awareness. That's something that you were trained to do. And if you don't look at that part, you're just going to keep picking things up and calling it responsibility. I didn't realize how much of that was still running in me until there was nothing left to prove it to. And it didn't stop. We talk about that here.